Brett, thanks for joining us. We're a couple minutes early actually, so we managed to get back on track. We had a bit of a delay earlier, but let's get started nonetheless. And we are here today to talk about live games, and especially live AAA games, which is maybe a bit different from mobile. Mobile games have been doing this live thing for a while now, and in the last few years, well, more than a few years actually, but this has started to be a trend in PC console as well. So I think it makes sense to talk a little bit about this, and share some experiences, and it will be great to learn from your experience in managing live games. But first, let's start with a brief introduction. Can you talk a little bit about yourself, and your path in the video games industry, and what you are doing today at Blizzard?
Absolutely. So my name is Brett Crawford. I've been at Blizzard now for a little over 10 years. I've been a part of the Heroes team since its inception, so 8 years now. I got to help build what is now the talent system and everything else that goes along with it. I started on Heroes as a balance designer. I did that for a couple of years before transferring into more of a live design system design role. And then from there, I took over the game about 3 years ago as the lead game designer.
And what were you doing, if you don't mind me asking, before Heroes of the Storm, and actually before Blizzard? Were you in the games industry before, or did you start at Blizzard?
Nope, that's kind of a funny question, actually. I was a food and beverage director of a hotel in Oregon, so it's quite a
Oh,
flip flop. So
so
customer service, I mean, that's been my entire world. Working on a live game is doing the same thing. I'm just doing a different kind of service. But so I did that in Oregon. I moved to California for Blizzard. I got my foot in the door in QA. I started with StarCraft 2 during Wings of Liberty times, which was amazing. Like just getting your foot in the door at Blizzard is awesome. I did that for about 6 months, and then I went to a more of a user experience role. And so we created a small team of like high-end gamers for the most part, and we would test all of the new content that's coming in through like Mythic raids, through WoW, or D3's auction house before launch, and all of these things. We'd test all of that stuff for them and then give the developers feedback. So that's where I kind of got my roots into the development side of things. And then a position opened at for a balance designer for Heroes, and I was a huge mobile player at that point in time. So applied for it and jumped into that, and it's been a whirlwind ever since.
So, but let's start with this. So you've been part of the Heroes team, since the early days, and you had the opportunity to be part of that both during the pre-launch development stage and in the in all the years post-launch since then. So how does the process differ from one stage to the other? What is different in doing live game management versus actual pre-launch game development? How does it change? How does the team change? How does the process change? Let's spend some time on this topic.
Sure. I think the first thing that I would really like to dig into is that before you launch the game, you're a much smaller team. Um, you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, so you have a very. I think that when I joined the team, there was around 8 to 10 people on it, and that was it. We were trying to figure out what does a talent system look like. Do we have a shop? What are the game pillars? I think that's another really important thing. Is like you're using this time to set a foundation of what the future of the game is going to look like, and then you're building your design pillars on top of that foundation. And then as soon as you get ready to transfer into live production, that's where everything has to be set up and ready. Because if you don't really have the vision of where you want to drive the game before you actually launch it, I think people can kind of get into a weird area where they don't know exactly what you're trying to do with it. And so for Heroes specifically, we knew that we wanted 20-minute games. We wanted fast-paced action. We didn't want people having to farm for the first 15 to 20 minutes and then come into combat. We wanted to come out of the gates like swinging at each other. And at that time, I was working with Dustin pretty closely on what does the talent tree look like? Do we put stats on talents? Do we do all of this stuff? So this is a time where you can kind of pre-production, you get to play with things and iterate very quickly. We're doing a lot of paper designs because we don't have enough time to put it into code and then test it. So we get together and talk about, one of 7 different iterations. I think we went through 7 or 8 different iterations of the talent trees before it actually made in game. Stuff like that. And then once you launch, you kind of shift gears. You're still making content. You're still having all of these creative moments. But now especially with a free-to-game play, now you're feeding the players the content that they want in a very fast cadence, especially for us and especially for Blizzard. We went into shipping patches almost every 3 weeks, which was unheard of, and new heroes every 3 weeks. So once we actually shipped the game and went into a live format, it was more like heads down. We have all these hero pipelines coming up. We have the live team working on reworks and balance, and it was pretty much just like a content treadmill at that point.
So, but yeah, actually, speaking of that, if I'm not mistaken, live games were sort of a novelty for Blizzard when Heroes launched. I think Hearthstone was already out at that point, but if I'm not mistaken, there was not much else in terms of live games going on. So there wasn't, let's say, there probably wasn't sort of a company culture of doing live game management at that point. What kind of challenges did this present?
So yeah, I think we were trailblazers for most of Blizzard. They were taking a look at the free-to-play model. How are we going to monetize it? Learning from the mistakes and the trips that we had along the way. And I think Hearthstone and us at the same time we were kind of in tandem a little bit. But I'll say, I think the hardest part for us is probably just learning to step back and let everything flow into the game naturally, instead of, because we were still, when we went from pre-production into regular launch, I still wanted to iterate on everything. The designers were still trying to touch things, but we had a live game at that moment, and so it's really important for you to take your hands off the wheel a little bit, look at what's coming down the pipe, and then make really long-term plans at that point. So if we want to shift the game through gameplay updates and stuff like that, we'd only do it once a year. We'd do it after BlizzCon. We'd make sure that we had them planned way in advance so people could get ready for them. But yeah, as a live game, I remember there were a lot of decisions that were being made very quickly just on the data that we were receiving, because it was new for us, absolutely new. I worked really close with some monetization managers on what they were doing when we launched Heroes 2.0. But yeah, we were just trailblazing for the rest of what Blizzard is going to become. I think we probably helped make some decisions from Overwatch as well, and the way that they did their stuff, just because they could learn from what we were going through.
And you were also doing this interesting thing, and that I think was sort of a selling point for Heroes of the Storm. It certainly was for me, because I didn't play MOBAs, but I did play Heroes, which was the getting all these characters from all these different games, meeting at the same. So that was very exciting. Did that? Was that a challenge? I mean, did it imply working with all the different teams of the different games?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we were lucky. So everyone that's worked on this game has been super passionate. They love Blizzard. All of these IPs coming together is a spot that we didn't have. And so we could really, really flex and play with it. But we did have to pay homage to all of where these roots come from. So when we're bringing in heroes from the other IPs, whether it's StarCraft or Diablo or World of Warcraft or wherever, we spend a lot of time on the hero design of that to make sure that it was fitting their lore, their backgrounds, what their abilities would do. We couldn't just make things up as we go. We really needed to tie it back into the fantasies of these legendary heroes. It wasn't until Orphea that we really got a chance to make a Nexus hero. something that would come from scratch, which was fun for us and was exciting for the team to do because we could actually take something that was ours and was a part of our IP. And then yeah, we did Kira as well not too long after that. But the biggest thing that to take away from all of that is that players, especially Blizzard players, they want to see their heroes coming from the other IPs. It's a battleground smash royale for the most part. So players want to see Jaina fighting Diablo, right? It's fun. And so we try to really stick to those heroes, and then working with the other dev teams is challenging sometimes because we'll have different visions of what certain things do, and we have to adapt with an isometric camera compared to like bringing Mei in or any Overwatch hero was a little bit tougher because we have a top-down camera. We have to make some concessions on abilities and what they do and the way that affects look. So we work hand in hand with the other teams pretty closely on that, and butt heads sometimes, but for the most part, it made the product better. And so all of those heroes are something that both teams can be proud about, both the heroes team and slash Overwatch slash World of Warcraft and stuff like that. But yeah, we worked very closely with them and still do.
So, maybe uncomfortable question here to ask, but I have to ask. We're talking about live games, and anyone who has ever managed a live game has at least one horror story, something that is something that happened, while the game was live, and the team sort of scrambles to fix it. And I would love to hear something like that from you. I mean, if it's possible to share, and to break the ice, I will actually.
I'm sorry, I'm frozen again at the moment. Hopefully, it fixes.
I can hear you. Let's see. Okay, it's back.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Did you hear Did you hear?
I heard the first part, not the last part.
So I was saying that anyone who has managed live games has these horror stories of awful things that happened on live with actual users. And I was wondering if we can do sort of an exchange. I share one story, you share one, if it's possible, and let me break the ice. So I remember we were working on the launch of a racing game. It was a mobile game back in the day. I won't share the title, but the idea was, we had identified. So the game was live. We had identified a really deep issue with one of the servers that would cause people's data to become corrupted and completely delete their progress. The team worked during the weekend to fix that, and they did. Everyone was happy that they managed to do that. And this was a problem that was identified on a build that was supposed to be put live soon. And so this was identified shortly after putting that thing live, shortly before. So the team worked on the weekend to solve it. And then what happened was, when the correct build went live, suddenly we were seeing exactly the issue that was supposed to be prevented. So everyone goes into panic mode. What happened? I mean, we thought we had fixed that, and it turned out that despite all the effort, what we did was we simply put the wrong build live. So we took the one that actually had the problem, and we put that live. Yeah, there was some fallout. Some people lost progress. We had to send out some gifts to compensate. Wasn't too bad. We fixed it fast enough. But it makes you sweat a little bit when something like that happens.
Yep. Of the best developers in the world, but I would say that our biggest uh-oh moments were game-breaking bugs. Anytime that you launch a build and something, if we're really we were really good at having the heroes find a way to get outside of the battleground or to just disappear and delete. And when you have a player that cannot play the game, that are as sitting in a live game for 20 minutes, it's instantly hot fixable for us. Like we have to be able to move very quickly on it. So those are the tough ones, and that's something that we have so many interactions between heroes and between abilities that something live is gonna probably get caught with a new hero well after it's been launched, and we have to be able to react very quickly to it. But yeah, there were times, most recent that I can remember is Deathwing could fly off the map, like his heroic could just find a way to get off the map completely, and then occasionally, if they got into the wrong spot off the map, they couldn't get their character back again. Things like
Wow.
that, and then we have to go in and try to figure out what the interactions are, how to fix it, and then quickly put a hot fix in, which is not easy for a game our size. It takes a lot of extra testing and, as you said, like people working on weekends to make sure that we have builds right and RC's done, and then launching from there. But yeah, I think bugs are the biggest one. But I'll share another one with you, and then you can give me another one if you want. But during, I believe it was beta, um, our MMR calculations are insane on the background, like the players um, ranking and stuff like that. And we tweaked a couple server code changes, and players were gaining and losing MMR in like almost vice, like where they'd win games and lose MMR, and lose games and win MMR. And so we'd already had players set up for, like, they were already in a good spot. And so we ended up having, after we released it, we didn't have a good way to roll back to the previous MMRs, and so that's when we made the final decision to go ahead and just wipe when we released the game and start fresh.
Oh, so here's another one from me. So, pretty classical actually. Releasing a build with debug mode on. And the problem wasn't that people could hack it or anything. The problem was that because it had debug mode on, it was constantly spamming the server with requests. So because of that, it managed to crash the entire server infrastructure, affecting multiple other games from the company. So that was a fun night.
Yeah.
But right, yeah, good stuff. This type of stories goes much better over a drink. Maybe next year. But getting back on topic, you mentioned the myriad of abilities that you guys have in Heroes. So how do you approach balancing, especially with the number of with the crazy amount of characters that you have? And is there an amount of balancing that happens before? I mean, obviously there is some balancing that happens before releasing a new hero. I'm guessing there are a bunch of tests that happen after. Is there any automation in testing out this stuff, or how does it work?
No, I mean, we'll get into automation in a minute, because that's a really interesting question that I've thought about a lot as a balance designer as I was coming through. But the tools that we use were mostly live analytics. Like we had data hooks into everything. So we know what hero's winning, what hero's losing. We know what talents are winning, what talents are losing, and like we have really good data throughout. And so it was taking all of that data and trying to parse the differences between high level play and low level play, because they're going to be much different. Your low level players might have a talent that's got a sub 40% win rate, while your high level players are sitting at a 60% win rate with it. And so it's like taking that information and trying to figure out what's the right change for the game that's not going to hurt the low level players by fixing the high level play. We always tended to skew towards making sure that we were balancing towards high level, but that didn't mean that you just nerf a talent or nerf a hero because they're overperforming in one level. There's ways to get creative and do that differently. But on the subject of actually automating it, there were points in time that if we just wanted to look at the data and we had a smart enough AI to parse everything and to make on the fly changes, I think that would have been awesome, because it's not you can teach it. You could teach the program to say, okay, this talent has a 52% win rate. We'll give you the 3 hooks that that talent has to be able to change. We know that it's going to determine either a fluctuation in win rate. And so if it could take a look at that and say, okay, it's winning a little bit too much, I'm going to move the number down a tiny amount, a tiny fraction, and then recalculate again the next day, right? And do it again and again and again. I think that you would probably, if you had that capability, I think you'd probably have a much more balanced game. But the more that I thought about that, the more I think about it kind of loses. At the end of the day, it might flatten everyone out. Like heroes might tend to become very, very flat because there are abilities, and we bounce around this too sometimes, but there are abilities or skills or talents that we want to be a higher win rate in certain tiers for certain heroes because that's part of their power pie and they skew differently. So Thrall might have a talent at level 16, or all of his talents at level 16. They're overperforming compared to other heroes at level 16. But then Jaina might have the same thing at level 7, right? Mm-hmm. And so it just gives you a different power curve for each of the heroes. And I think that if we automate that, there's probably ways you could do it, but if you try to automate just in a vacuum, you're going to end up with a lot of heroes that just feel kind of flat throughout the game instead of those power curves and power waves.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and honestly, I mean, I play Hearthstone a lot, but one thing I see, when you find that thing that is overpowered, I mean, it's kind of fun to make use of that for at least for a while. Then you get sick of it. I mean, it's all part of the game actually, of the meta game, to have those kind of overpowered interactions, and you have fun with them for some time, and then you find the next thing to stick with.
It's fun until you have to play against it a lot. Like when everyone figures it out and it's no longer you just playing with the toy, then yeah. I mean, I think that's a very big design goal for most games, and especially PvP games, is how do you make something that's fun to play as, not feel oppressive to play against? Something you feel excited about doing something cool and big and powerful, but the enemy doesn't feel like it was just not fair, right? And that's the golden standard that you want. That was one of the rules that we made. That you want every hero to feel overpowered, right? But you don't want you don't want them to be overpowered in the whole scope of the game.
Yeah, that's I guess that's easier said than done, though. I mean, it's a very lofty goal, but
it's an.
Yeah, sorry, lost you for a second.
Yeah.
All right. So one other question. You've been, Heroes has been live for some time. How, in terms of managing the team, do people get tired after, creatively, I mean, after working on the same title for some time? How do you manage that? How do you maintain team morale? Any thoughts you have on this? And I'm sure this is a very real topic for a lot of developers, both on PC and console and mobile, and maybe even more so on mobile.
Yeah, so starting with myself, I'm lucky enough that since I was kind of I'm seeing everything. I'm seeing all the systems, all the features, all the heroes. Every day is a little bit different for me. So I was able to have a lot of creative changes in my day-to-day work, which kept me super excited and passionate at all times. But I had other developers and designers, especially, that maybe they were a hero designer for a few years. And you could kind of tell it's like they're going through the motion. Okay, the next hero, I've got to spin this up, do this, do that. And so for me, it was making sure that all the people on the team, if they needed a break from something, to give them that. So there were times where I would take a hero designer and say, okay, well, instead of designing the next hero, let's let you work on the live game for X amount of time, right? So you can get something new in you and spread yourself out a little bit and learn something new. This gave them a break, and I did it through cross disciplines as well. A lot of our effects artists could also animate and so on and so forth. So it gave them a little bit of a structure change if they wanted it. But yeah, it gets tough when you're doing the same thing over and over again. Luckily enough, our game was constantly changing, and we always had something new coming in and something new to get excited about. So it wasn't a huge issue, but there were times you need to always be checking in with your developers and seeing where they're at, because if they're excited and passionate about what they're working on, they'll blow you away with the work. But if they're starting to get burned out and worn down on what they're doing, you're going to start seeing it, and it's going to fade into the game, and that's the last thing you want. Like you want people just excited about just as excited about working on the game as playing the game.
Makes sense. And let's talk about community for a little bit. So obviously, for any live game, community is it's essential. It's the air that the game is breathing. And we had a session. I don't know if you saw it earlier on. So I had a session on community management, and that was a very it was very pragmatic, how to get feedback from the community and so on. But let me address you, the other questions. How and especially since you've been with the game from early on, how do you build that relationship with the community, and how do you maintain that through the ups and downs of the game life cycle? What are some recommendations that you have on this?
So I think this was an ongoing process with us, and it originated from Dustin as well. And I think it started internally before we went external, which was while we were building the game and making the game before we shipped it. We still have the actual channel and still get it, but we had a internal email called like Heroes Feedback. And anytime that a developer would send feedback to that channel, we were asked to respond to it. So it didn't just get caught in the ether, and it was more of a listening practice for us to make sure that we were hearing all the voices that were coming in about stuff. And even if we didn't agree with it, it forced us to look at that side of things and to respond accordingly. And then once we shipped the game, we kind of took that attitude into our forums and on Reddit. And while we didn't always respond to them, we were always reading and trying to take that feedback, and it changed the game every single patch. What the community is talking about, and they have their fingers on the pulse of the game just like we do. And so taking some of their concerns and making changes, and even taking some of their suggestions and making changes, it showed them in the next patch that they were being listened to. And then as the game developed and we get a couple years in and we get more seasoned developers that are going on, we go through a bunch of PR training, and we start opening up the floodgates of it, like us responding on these on the forums and on Reddit and stuff like that, and trying to have discussions. You have to be really careful there because you can't win an argument on the internet, and there's no reason for you to argue. So it's more along the lines of what are they trying to give you as critical feedback sometimes, or just as fun feedback, and how can I help, or the developer help explain to them our reasoning and thought process behind the changes we're making, because that's what's most important is letting them know that we're thinking about it. We're not just doing things because we want to do them. We're doing them because we feel like it's going to make the game better. But there was a time not too long ago that we had the entire team responding to feedback all the time, and it was a really healthy practice, and I think that we created a really healthy community because of it. We've calmed down over the past few months on doing that. I still respond here and there, but you have to keep that line of communication open, especially in a live game, because players are going to realize that the work that you're putting in is making the game better, but you have to tell them why and how you feel like that your changes are doing that.
Thanks. So I think it's time we start looking at questions from the audience, and I have one here that is actually related to what you were just saying. So how do you moderate and make sure online communication is safe for everyone involved? This would be a concern, maybe even more for smaller studios who want to venture into online games. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, I think if you are in a smaller game team or even a smaller company, I'm sure there's PR, there's public relation trainings out there. Having the correct tone is so important when you're communicating on these, like you're putting your voice out there. And one of the things that has stuck with me through the many years of doing so is that when I'm communicating with the community on a public space, the only person that can really be hurting is myself. Because if I say or do something wrong in that forum, it can have real ramifications to my job and to the company here. And so always going into making sure that you're rereading what you're going to post 100 times. When we were doing our live AMAs on Reddit, we would have our PR people looking through responses to make sure that there was no tone changes or things like that. Of course, a smaller company isn't going to have that. But I think that as long as you're answering the community in a positive way and you're trying to explain your thinking, I think you're pretty safe. It's when you start saying, no, you're wrong, or I disagree with this because blah, blah, blah. You're opening the door for negative interactions that you probably don't want to be opening the door for.
Makes a lot of sense. I think though the question was more about moderating the community, because you want to avoid toxic environments within the community, so player to player. Is that something that you try to address actively, or how does it work?
I mean, I get if you're going towards like the toxicity front of like players being mean to other players,
Yeah.
that was really, really important for us early. And that's why we still don't have all chat in the game. We didn't have team chat for a long time either until we sat down and had a really large discussion of whether it would be better or worse. And it's still debatable whether we should have pulled that trigger or not. It's really difficult to give players a chance, especially in a PvP environment, a chance to talk with each other that they're not going to attack each other.
Even within the team, you're right.
Yep.
Sometimes especially within the team.
It's worse within teams sometimes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But we have a risks team that moderate things. Our reports buttons, they every time a person is reported, they get a certain amount of points flagged to their name, and then once that hits a risk level, we will action based on those things. And so making sure that players realize that the reports are working is probably really important, right? Because if a player hits a button and it goes into the ether and they never know whether it works or not, they're always going to say, oh, the reporting it doesn't work, right? So why would I spend time pushing this extra button? But I would say setting up a feedback loop for the players that are actually reporting other players, and hopefully a positive feedback loop, whether it's granting them something or giving them a thank you, if anything else, in an email, is enough for them to go, oh, they appreciate me doing this. And that allows the players to kind of self-moderate, and we don't have to step in as much. But yeah, there's definitely some. One of our pillars was try to reduce the amount of toxicity that has been around in MOBAs and this kind of genre in a long time, for a long time. And I think we did a pretty good job of it. It's difficult, I'll tell you that. There's no silver bullet here, or games would have found it a long time ago.
Yeah, I think you guys took the right decision in delaying that chat, even the team chat. So I think that helped keep the game very low toxicity.
We also allow players to turn it off, right? So yeah. I think that's also something that I didn't touch on, but giving players the option to opt into go the opt route to allow them to step away from it, or to allow parents to let their kids play in a safer environment.
Yeah. And one last question. So live games, online games, MMOs, not necessarily MMOs, but any live game, is this a territory that is reserved to big companies that have the resources to build something at scale, or is this something that more smaller independent developers can try to tackle? Any thoughts on that? And I mean, I know it's not necessarily an easy question to answer, but just how do you feel about this?
So yeah, I'll start by saying this isn't my opinion. It's by no, I'm just one person, one developer out there. But I honestly, for sure, think that a smaller studio can get into the live game space. I think that it's been shown before already many times. And then the thing is getting your game out there enough to have players talk about it, and then if they like it and they can monetize it well, then it'll push it to all new levels. Look at PUBG. Look at any of those games where it kind of started off a little bit small and then just exploded, right?
Even Among Us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was years. It was years after it was created before that happened. It
Yeah.
just takes a couple popular streamers to bring it into the limelight, and then everyone's talking about it, right? So I think it happens all the time. Of course, not every. There's so many games now that are coming out that not every game is going to be a massive hit. But if you have the right like ingredients and you make the correct soup of a game, and the players like it, it can explode, and then you can scale. I don't think that you should. I think it might be a little bit of a mistake to start small and then expect that you're going to scale over a certain amount of time without having any kind of data backing up whether the game is actually good or not.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I feel the same thing, the same way actually, because like you said, there are examples, but it is hard, and it is hard for sure, harder than offline games, for all of the reasons that we talked about here, and probably many others that we didn't talk about. If you're a developer and you're thinking about doing an online game, I think the takeaway is think really carefully about how you approach things, and you want to do your research. You want to make sure you spend the right amount of effort, and that you hit. You check all the necessary boxes, especially in terms of quality of. I'm not even talking about the game being fun. That is sort of like baseline. You have a fun game, you can turn it into a success if you also have all these other things that we talked about. But yeah. Thanks a lot, Brett. I think this was a really fun conversation. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for being part of our event, and maybe in future editions we'll get to do it in person.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for inviting me, and I had fun. It's been a great event so far, so I look forward to the rest of it.
Thanks. Tomorrow we have. It's a completely different format tomorrow. So we are doing live streams of independent games from the Eastern European region. So
yep, I'm excited. You'll see me there. I'll be watching.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Brett.